Welcome to the Pages of Light podcast, your destination for discussions of popular fantasy and science fiction novels from a Christian worldview. My name is Tyler, aka Verum, and with me, as always, is Gabriel, aka the Quarantine Quartermaster. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, it's good to be here. And round 2 of Dune, here we come. All right.
Round 2 of Dune. If you missed the last episode, make sure you go check that out. We kicked off our discussion of Dune by Frank Herbert from 1965, one of the granddaddies of science fiction. So yeah, go check that out if you missed that episode. Make sure you go follow us on social media. We're at Pages of Light on Facebook, Instagram. Go check out our YouTube channel, and you can check out the video version of this podcast and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos that get put up over there. You can also head over to our website, and you can see our blog and some of the other stuff we're doing over there. So yeah, as I said, we're going to be doing part 2 of Dune, and we're doing Dune because the movie is coming out very shortly. Whenever this episode goes up, I think the movie should be out in just a few days. So you can listen to this episode, and then you can go buy your tickets for Dune, and you can go check it out. And I think it'll be looking, basically on the reviews, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good movie. So I'm very excited to go and watch that. So yeah, this episode we're going to mostly look at a lot of the plot points in the story, things that are happening in the Book of Dune. The last episode we did a lot of character discussion and just information about who the characters were, and what we thought was important about them and what made them interesting and pivotal to the story. And we talked a little bit about some of the atmosphere and the world building and all of those types of things as well. But now we'll talk a little bit more about the actual things that are happening in Dune and how the plot points tie together, and some of our thoughts, and some stuff from a Christian worldview as well. The first scene in the first part of the book, we get Paul on Caladan, and he has a test. I'm not sure if the name of the test was given, but there's this thing called the Gom Jabbar, which is this poison needle that this member of the Bene Gesserit, the Reverend Mother, they did say what her name was, but I can't remember. I think it's Mohim or something like that. But so she comes to Caladan, and she's giving Paul this test, which is a test to see if you're human, essentially, or an animal. I think that's the basic gist of the test.
Yep, that is. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just an interesting premise on that test to see if you're a human, because she says if you're a human, you stick your hand in this box, and she says, Paul asks what's in the box, and she says pain. So yeah, that's great, brilliant. Thanks for letting me know that. And so he puts his hand in the box, and it's this excruciating pain, and she says that a human will leave their hand in the box and endure the pain because they don't want to be killed, because if he removes his hand, she's going to stick this needle in his neck and kill him, essentially. And she says, but an animal would just remove their hand out of instinct and not and just die, because they don't have any higher brain functions. They can't make decisions to endure pain for a benefit later on. It's kind of an aspect of delayed gratification, or you're doing something knowing of the results that will come, not because it's necessarily fun in the moment. So I think it's just an interesting test and a premise, and I think it's very indicative of what sets humans apart from other creatures. I don't know, do you have any just thoughts on that test and that whole scene?
First of all, I never want to go through that test in my life. I would tap out so early. It'd be this guy's just an animal. So Paul endures an insane amount of pain, more than any other predecessor in the test. Everyone who's taken the test,
yes,
Paul has done better than any of them. And this makes them, the Bene Gesserit, pay attention because they think he might be the one prophesied that he was coming. And so this is cool because like there's not only a prophecy with the Bene Gesserit, but there's also a prophecy with the Fremen, and they are both predicting the same person. And how amazing must that person be if it's being predicted in two separate religions, separate planets, separate thought processes. Yeah, so that's pretty incredible. Yeah, and so he sticks his hand into this box, and it starts as like a tingle, and then it becomes an itch, and then it starts to burn, and then the pain is just incalculable. It's just so much pain, and yeah, I think that women, somewhere it's been proven that they have a higher tolerance of pain. It might have to do with the ability to birth children. I personally have had kidney stones, which I had a mother, like I'm a school teacher, so a mom told me she had kidney stones and she had given birth, and she said that they were like neck and neck for how painful they were. My kidney stone only lasted for like a day before I passed it, but whew, that was some crazy pain. Yeah, so I definitely would wuss out on that. So I'm glad Paul had to do it and not me. Yeah, that's my thought on the test.
Yeah, it definitely does not sound like a good thing at all. And yeah, I think I'm trying to remember. I don't know if it was because he was a man that they put him through the test in a harder way because he could be the chosen one or whatever it is. What was the term that they used? It was the Kwisatz Haderach?
Al-Aib or something. Oh yeah, the Haish Haderach or something. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
there's like so many names for Paul. It's difficult. There's like 2 different Fremen names, and then also the Bene Gesserit name. It's hard to keep them all straight.
Yeah, there are a lot. So yeah, Paul undergoes this test because he is part of this genetic breeding program through the Bene Gesserit. And whenever Jessica, she's not technically married to Duke Leto Atreides, she's just his concubine, but she is the one who gave birth to Paul. And so her orders from the Bene Gesserit sisterhood were to produce a daughter, because a lot of their genetic breeding is through daughters at the sisterhood. So they usually only breed daughters. But Jessica defied that order, and she produced a son because the Bene Gesserits are able to determine which sex or gender the baby is because of their training. And so I think because Leto wanted a son and not a daughter, that she gave that to him because of her devotion to him and not to she's still devoted to the sisterhood, but she defied them in order to give Leto what he wanted, essentially.
She does have a deep love for him.
Yeah.
And for Paul.
Yes. So she's very family oriented and loyal. And so because of that, Paul has the opportunity to become this prophesied person who is supposed to be a man who can access the memories of both male and female kind of things. And it kind of gets a little bit convoluted and very philosophical. So I don't know, we have to necessarily get really bogged down into the weeds all about it, but
we like the weeds though. Sometimes we like the weeds. So
that's true. Okay, did you have any specific thoughts about it?
So Paul has like so there's like several different trainings that he's undergoing. He's undergoing like the Mentat. So there was AI in the past in this in the Dune universe, and it went awry, and then there was a vow to never make any more AI. So they had these specialized like training programs for mentats, and they basically could calculate insane amounts of calculations, but it was kind of like at the cost of their humanity, because they became more of like a calculating engine, and they could do like extreme math, but then that's like all they did. They were all data oriented, empirical, empirically based beings. And then you have the training of the Bene Gesserit, and they are about self-control and analyzing people, and they also have their Jedi mind trick called the Voice, and then the training that Paul undergoes, and then and we haven't even talked about spice yet, and spice is like the currency of the universe in Dune, and it's on Arrakis. And that's why the control of this planet is so meaningful for all of the houses. The Atreides, the Emperor, and the Harkonnen, they all are paying attention to Dune because this is where spice is produced. And some of the interesting qualities of spice, there's actually a name for it. It starts with an M, but I can't remember it at the moment.
Spice melange.
Yeah, spice melange. And so it's kind of like this currency across the universe, and then when people get addicted to it, like they have to have it, and if they go off of it, it's like an addiction. They actually like die. They can't like cold turkey go off of it. So like once it's out in the universe, people need to keep getting supplies of it. And then the Fremen are, from Arrakis, and the quality of them is that they have these blue within blue eyes, and that's because of the spice trait. Like if they keep consuming the spice, which kind of like ups their like longevity, and they're like stronger, and they have these blue within blue eyes. And for Paul, it's a different sort of path. Like when he consumes the spice, it starts to bring out more of his like supernatural powers. Like he starts having more dreams. He can predict the future better.
Yep.
I think the word is prescient, which was a word that I don't hear very often. And because he's consuming the spice, and when he is, we're going to talk about him being on Arrakis and being lost, but as he starts putting that more and more into his diet, his abilities start to develop more and more. And so you kind of see that, he has these abilities that are kind of latent at the beginning of the book, and then they start becoming more and more prominent throughout the book because of his spice ingestion. So so he has a bunch of different skill sets. He's also a trained fighter, but he also has these like supernatural powers that come, as he becomes Paul Maud'Dib, the leader of the Fremen, and the chosen and the predicted one. He slowly becomes more and more that person as he incorporates spice into his diet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually interesting towards the end of the book, because after he's been there for so long, the spice's effects sort of start to wear off because his body becomes more and more used to it, so that he doesn't get as many dreams anymore as he used to, because his body's now like, oh, this is just the way it normally is. So it starts to actually like dull his abilities and not make him as able to use that prescience and to be able to see things that are going to come in the future. And so that's when he has to take that like drastic measure where he takes that water that the Bene Gesserits would normally use to become Reverend Mothers, I think it is. Something along those lines, where he does it,
no
but he's not supposed
has
to.
Ever
and it's like,
survived that test.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he has to go to like that drastic place to be able to get to a place where he can use his prescience again, which I think I saw this interesting thing. I think it was on like Facebook or something like that, where it was like, explain your favorite book in like one sentence or something like that, and somebody did Dune, and it was like something about like the world is destroyed because of drug addiction or something like that, or it's like they're just like all these people on Arrakis are addicted to this thing called spice, and if they don't have it, then it kills them, and that kind of and Paul kind of like he has to chase the next high, as it were, because he can no longer do what he could before, so he has to go like another step further to gain access to something that's even deeper than it was before.
Yeah, I think that pushes him even further in his abilities, because it's not just the spice. It's like, I mean, it's what transforms the Bene Gesserit into the Reverend Mother or whatever. So it's actually in this pursuit of like more power, and he kind of like pushes himself. But yeah, he also ends up in a coma for like 3 weeks or something.
Yep. So yeah, they're on Caladan, and then he passes the test, of course, and eventually they go to Arrakis. And I'm trying to remember, I don't actually think it was like necessarily spelled out that well, or maybe I just missed it, but there's a lot of things in this book, so I would not be surprised if I missed something. But I'm not sure exactly. Do you remember why he had to go to Arrakis and abandon Caladan? I think it was just because he needed to have some other kind of power source that Caladan couldn't give him, and they had to leave and take this risk and make a life there. But first of all, this book is not short, and that was at the beginning of the book, so it's kind of hard to remember back through the beginning of it. But I think that Duke Leto was in charge of Arrakis, and then he was kind of going to go there to sort things out because things aren't going the way that he wanted them to. So he was going to go there and kind of like take a more direct approach with the planet. And I think that's why his family is packing up and going to, including Paul and Jessica. And I think that's why they're going there. Yeah. So yeah, they get to Arrakis, and they get this nice. One of my favorite scenes in this whole book was whenever they got in they call them ornithopters, but they're like sci-fi helicopters essentially.
Yeah,
and
helicopters.
Yeah, they get in this. I'm just gonna say it's a helicopter because that's easier. So they get in this helicopter, and they are given this like tour of the kind of the area, and I loved the Frank Herbert describing the scenes and the different places that they were going, and them talking about like surviving in the desert and how they mined the spice and all of these things. And this is where we get our first introduction into the sandworms, because there's the sandworm that comes and like destroys that whole, I think it's like a mining factory or something like that, where they had all this spice and then they just lost all the spice. And Leto was more concerned about saving the people there than saving the spice. And that was such a great scene, and it was a really good indicator of like Leto's character and like what was important to him. And like he wasn't there to just like get the spice and be rich. Like he was there to like set up like a city and a community and a kingdom kind of, and he wanted to like make a place where people could live.
I think in that scene, like there was like some practice on Arrakis where like if you spotted the worm and like you helped contribute to it like not doing as much damage or something, or if you took out the worm, like you were entitled to like a bounty.
Oh yes.
And so like he was the Duke, and he was like, oh, I see this worm, and he actually spots it before Stilgar does, and he's like, oh, what's that over there? And they look at the worm, and so Stilgar radios the right people, and then it's taken out, and there's a bounty, and Duke Leto claims the bounty, and then immediately, and this is what you should do if you're a Christian, he takes the bounty that he was given, and he's like, I don't really need this, and he gives it back to the people who are living on the planet. And I think that's a call for what God wants us to do with our possessions and our resources, is like we're a conduit. Like we take care of like our our mortgage, our our food and the things in our house, and like when we have excess, we shouldn't go into luxury too much. But like you can have nice things, but at the same time, like, are you working for God? Are you like letting yourself be a conduit of like, I have plenty, let's give the plenty out to other people and help them? And Duke Leto does this right away, and you can see the benefits because I think it's Stilgar's like thought process, or I don't know whose it is, but they were observing Duke, and they were like, oh, like he's building relationships already, like he's been on the planet for a very short time and he's already giving back to the people, and like that's the way God intends it to be. Like if your cup runneth over, then you kind of like continue the train. You're a conduit of the resources that God has given you to shepherd, and you just pass them on to the people who need them. And that's a good way to earn friends and to give back to the community.
Yeah, I think it was you were saying Stilgar, but I think it was Liet Kynes. I think that was his name, the guy that was giving them the tour. I don't think we meet Stilgar until later, whenever Paul and Jessica escape and go through the desert.
That was a long time ago in the book, so you could be very right.
Yeah, I think Liet Kynes is the one who's there, who's the imperial planetologist who was sent there by the Emperor. Actually, I think his father, Pardnot Kynes, was the one who was initially sent to Arrakis, and then Liet is his son, who is now there. Pardnot Kynes died, but now Liet Kynes is there, and he's now the planetary ecologist. And so his whole kind of goal on Arrakis is to terraform the planet so that they can have like plants there, and they don't have to be so stingy with their water, and they can have like they can actually change the weather system and change the way the planet is so that the people on Arrakis can actually have like a prosperous life and not have it be such a brutal place to live. And so that's kind of his goal when he's there,
which is also the Fremen goal as well. Like the Fremen desire to have their planet turned into a place. I love the descriptions of like Paul describing how water would fall from the skies, and they have oceans, and the Fremen are like, what is this place that you are from? My friend, I can't understand it. Like they're all blown away by just there being rain, and oceans and ponds and lakes and stuff, because water is so precious. And we talked about the still suits and how they preserve the water in the body, and then there's still tents, if you're staying out in the desert, and how I think the only places of respite are down kind of like in the bowels of the dunes and stuff, where the
caves,
the big Fremen populations are. And then there's like a seal that like keeps the moisture in, and so that's the only place that they can really take off their still suits. And apparently it smelled terrible. And it was but Stilgar was all about the smell in there.
But going on with the Liet Kynes thing, and Leto doing that thing with the spice where he gives it back to the people, that was something that where Kynes was like, I really like this Duke, and that like leads into a part of the story towards the end of part 1, where he helps Paul and Jessica escape from the Harkonnens because of that impression that Leto had given Kynes, and he was kind of on the side of the Atreides family and not the Harkonnens, because he saw that the Atreides were coming there to like make life better for the people of Arrakis and the Fremen, and the Harkonnens were coming there to make life harder and destroy things and like kill the people. The Vladimir Harkonnen has one of his nephews, Rabin, like running the planet whenever Duke Leto is murdered, and like he just like makes life seriously difficult for the people of
Yeah, he's like
Arrakis.
oppressing them and making it,
Yeah.
making life terrible for them, essentially.
And so basically, like these few days that Leto is on Arrakis, and he makes an impression on the people, and it like sways them to his side because of how generous he was and how he like wanted to do things in their own customs, and he wanted to learn how they did things, and he wanted to be respectful of their culture and all of those different things. So yeah, I mean, I think that just can speak to like our own life. Like we should be people who want to learn, who want to give people the benefit of the doubt, who want to give back to other people as much as we can based on the abundance that we have. And you'll win the loyalty of people in that way. And yeah, I think it's just a good like axiom for life.
Yeah, for sure. That's biblical way to live.
Of course. Yeah, so I think the next big kind of plot point is with this doctor. His name's Dr. Yua, and the betrayal. And he's something called a souk doctor. It might be like a place or a school. I can't remember specifically. But they have something called like imperial conditioning. Yeah, Yui. Mm-hmm. Yui or Yua.
Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but he has like imperial conditioning, which means he's not able to like go like betray his orders and the people that he's been charged with serving. And somehow the Harkonnens have figured out how to break him essentially, and essentially they've like kidnapped his wife, or I'm not sure if it's his wife or just like his lover. And he basically doesn't want anything to happen to her. Yeah, he basically doesn't want anything to happen to her. So he's willing to betray the Atreides in the hopes that she'll get let go. But I think his real plan is just to kill Vladimir Harkonnen. And so in a roundabout way, he's still doing it to like, but he's doing it to kill the Harkonnens. He's not doing it just because he wants to betray the Atreides, because he actually does.
Yeah, he has the remorse. Atreides.
Yeah. And we see that in like the notes that he leaves, and he leaves them. He leaves Paul and Jessica Leto's ducal signet so that he has proof that he's like the ducal heir, and all these different things. So he does a betrayal, but he does it in like, he tries to like do everything that he can to like make up for what he's doing. But he still has to go through with the betrayal, I guess.
He's trying to alleviate the guilt that he has for killing a good, honest man, Duke Leto.
Yep.
And he goes, "Remember the tooth." So essentially, he like drugs the Duke, and the
shoots
Duke
him with
is
a dart.
like semi-conscious. Yeah. He's like semi-conscious, and he's like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "You must remember the tooth." And so he plants like this. And like the description that Frank Herbert has of like all these like different weapons, like the Sardaukar warriors, like you're not supposed to trust them. Like they have like in their hair, like basically like a piano wire strong enough to like strangle people and use it as a garrote. He's like the boy who's sent to kill the Baron has like a needle implanted in his skin. And then there's like the Seeker dart that tries to kill Paul. It's like a remote controlled dart that flies through the room, and it's attracted to like motion. Those are some really cool, like they're very like very tiny parts of the storyline, but they're also very cool technologies that he talked about. So Yui gives the Leto a tooth. It's like this false tooth. So this is the technology, and he says like when you are with the Baron, so Yui has to drop off the Duke with the Baron so that the Baron can verify that he's being killed, and he wants to kill him, and so he's like, "You will remember the tooth." And so Duke's captured. He's brought to Baron Harkonnen, and he bites down on the tooth, and it releases this noxious gas that fills the room, and it kills several people. But the Baron escapes just barely, but it does kill his mentat, and his mentat, like we said, it's the calculating person. And then he brings the Atreides mentat on board, and that kind of plays out later in the storyline, that he's actually being betrayed by that mentat. Hawat, I think is his name.
Hawat Thufir or something.
Mm-hmm. And so the Duke dies.
He's duped because he thinks that Jessica was the betrayer, and so he thinks that he's trying to get revenge against Jessica, right?
Oh yeah, the mentat, yeah. And the guy who trained Paul, I forgot his name again. Yeah, Gurney. They both think that Jessica is the betrayer, but it's Yui. And yeah, the conditioning, I always think of like classical conditioning with Pavlov and his drooling dogs, and how he like rang a bell and then they would start drooling. So like apparently in the future they've they figured out how to condition someone to respond, and that comes up later when Fade Rotha is fighting in the Gladiator. And that's a very interesting point. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna side quest it for just a second. We haven't had a good side quest yet.
Well, we accept a good side quest here.
Yeah, so Fade Rotha is in a fight, and he's got a big sword and a short sword, and normally the short sword is the one that's poisoned, and he's fighting this gladiator, and the gladiator is supposed to be drugged, but he's not in this instant, and Baron Harkonnen is watching Fade fight this guy, and at the beginning of the fight they said he's being conditioned that if you call him scum, like he will weaken, and like just for a moment, and then Fade Rotha does end up using the word, he calls him scum because he's on the verge of losing. He's like the guy's like moving the knife into his chest, and he's worried, so he says scum. And then at the end of the book we have Paul versus, and I know we're going to talk about this, Fade in the end, and Paul takes quote unquote the high road, and he says, I don't want to know about this, because his mother is trying to say that Fade Rotha has the same programming or the conditioning built into him, where if you speak this word that he will weaken at that moment. And Paul says, I will not do that. And so he wants to have the fight of the fights.
A fair fight.
Side quest. Yeah. So when we were talking about Yui and conditioning, that took me down the whole road in the book. There's lots of different conditionings that are going on. So Yui ends up getting killed by, and he thought that was going to happen. So he's like, you will rejoin your wife in hell. I don't know. And then they kill him. So he expected to die. But that is why Paul and at that point, Paul and Jessica are captured, and they are bound, and they're put in the Thopter, because Baron Harkonnen is worried about the soothsayers, or the truth tellers that work for the Emperor, and he tells Fade Rotha, if you're going to survive in this, this world where plans within plans exist, you have to be able to say with complete truth that you have to keep your hands clean, which is interesting because truth telling is something that's usually reserved for the noble and the upright person, but he uses it as a shield himself, because he's like, I'm never going to get my hands dirty so that I can speak truthfully. Oh, I didn't know about, so and so dying. I didn't kill them. That wasn't by my hand. And he can say that honestly. So, that comes back to God, and there is power in speaking the truth. But we see again, it's all in how you choose to do it. Here, Baron Harkonnen has this black heart, and he uses truth as a shield. and it's not being used in an honorable way. But we as Christians, we should try and, I've said it before on the podcast, I try and weave truth into the universe. If you speak the things that you are going to do, the Bible says, let your yes mean yes and let your no mean no. Like when you speak the truth and people see that, you become more trustworthy, and you are able to bring healing to a situation, whereas lies and deceit can kind of rip a situation apart and lead to entropy and things falling apart. Okay.
Yeah.
Side quest complete.
Well, it's kind of like that. Be the change you want to see in the world. Like you can't change the world by just like thinking about it.
I think that's
like you have
that's
to
a Gandhi
actually
saying.
Oh, is it Gandhi? All right.
I think it's Gandhi. Yeah.
But yeah, like you can't change the world by doing nothing and just having idealistic thoughts. Like you have to take action. You have to bring people alongside you that can help make the change, and so yeah, definitely.
And I also think that just like you being the change in the world, it's like I think people, like when you're in a position and you tell people how they should act, and then you yourself act differently, like that doesn't hold the same weight as if you tell someone how they should act and then they see you living it out. Like, we need to do something over here. Yeah. And you can't just, your words ring hollow if you're not actually doing it.
Yeah, and that can be seriously detrimental to sharing the gospel, because how many times have you seen instances where like you'll see Christians doing, or so-called Christians doing things, and you're like, man, if non-Christians see Christians doing X thing that people know is wrong, then how much more are they going to just write off the Bible and what Christianity has to say? Because if the thought process goes, if the Christian doesn't even try to live up to the standards, then like why would I go in there? Because I'm not going to be any better. Essentially, it just kind of gives Christianity a bad name. So it's imperative that Christians do their best to try to live up to what the Bible and how the Bible says we should live. Now, obviously, understand that it's impossible to live up to the Bible's complete axioms, so
correct.
There has to be some kind of room for grace.
There's all the room for grace. Thank you, Jesus.
That's right. But there is something to be said for like, what's the passage in James? I mentioned it before in the podcast, where it says faith without deeds is dead. So you have to be doing some kind of actions and some kind of deeds to show that you are a Christian. So that way people know that you are different and that you have chosen a different way to live your life and that you have been changed by the faith that you have in Jesus. So you have to take action in order to show that from people. Words can anybody can say words, but it's what you do that really matters.
And we talked about a little bit on the last podcast, like how you want to be in that mode of like self-reflection of like how do I change myself to be like, to bring there's a good scripture on like you want to surrender every thought to God and to walk in his ways. And a lot of times we have Christians that don't do that, and I'm guilty just as of course. I'm not a person.
Everybody's guilty
sin,
of not living up.
Yeah. No one can live up to God's expectations, but that's why we have.
Let
grace.
him who is without sin cast the first stone. Right.
Correct. I always try and think of that, like whenever something's going bad, I'm like, listen, I'm not the person who say this is wrong, or if you do need to challenge something, you do it in a very tentative way. I'm not the I used to be the person who used to tackle it head on, but God's since gotten a hold of me and told me to just rein it in, Gabe. Just rein it in.
And there is a biblical way given to like address like sin and Christian communities, like you go to them as an individual and you talk to them about it and you try and show them what they're doing is wrong or whatever, and then you take a group of people and you go and do the same thing, and then if they still don't change, then you go to the larger church community and then you do the same thing, and then after that then you are supposed to like remove them from your Christian community. So there's like a process by which you try to address Christians who aren't acting in accordance with the way they should be acting. So, and there's like multiple chances for them to repent and change the way that they're acting, which just shows you like the level of grace that you're supposed to give people. Like you can't just see somebody do a thing and you're like write them off completely. Like you have to give them an opportunity to like
forgiveness,
see what they're doing, how they're doing is wrong, and like, oh yes, I see that now. Like I was blind, like my sin had blinded me to what I was doing, and now that you have enlightened me and shed light on this situation, I can now see how I was acting was wrong. But you have to give people that opportunity. You can't just cast them away at the first sign and first action of something that's bad. So, yep,
for sure. You have to
all right,
grow
now the
disciples.
side quest is completed.
Yeah, complete.
Yeah, so we left off with Yui killing, well, not killing. Well, yeah, I guess in a roundabout way he did kill Duke Leto, but he didn't. Technically, Leto killed himself, but we're getting into semantics there, though. So because
Yui bundled him up and delivered him for death.
He delivered him like a pig to slaughter.
Yep.
So because of all this stuff that's happened and the betrayal, the Harkonnens come in, and with all of their forces and Sardaukar troops that are dressed as Atreides soldiers. So they're Imperial soldiers, but they look like Atreides soldiers, which just makes it hard to distinguish, and they're able to take over pretty quickly. And so that means that Paul and Jessica have to flee, and they have to get out of there, or else they're gonna be next, because the Harkonnens want to take out the Atreides line, so they're no longer a threat on the political.
I think they were disguised as Harkonnens. I think they were Sardaukar disguised as Harkonnens, because in the long run, I think the Emperor did not want it known that he was taking out Duke Atreides, and so him and the Baron were in cahoots, saying like, "Oh, I will support you in this taking out of Duke Leto, but my Sardaukar can't be recognized, because when people see Sardaukar, they know it's the Emperor's will that's being done."
Yeah, you're right. That was my mistake. How dare I get one small detail in the Book of Dune wrong?
Hey,
that's
you know
impossible.
What? I'm sure we got other things wrong. That was just one thing. I was like, I think it was the other way.
If you saw something that we said that was wrong, leave a comment on the video.
Leave a comment. Oh, we're begging for punishment. Not really, but
no, don't be too harsh on us.
Don't be too harsh.
Yes, this is where we see Jessica and Paul. They get out and they get to this thopter, and they're able to fly away, and they're trying to escape from the Harkonnen soldiers, and they fly right into this big desert storm, and they somehow escape, and this is where they crash the thopter, and they get out unscathed, and this is where they make the long trek across the desert, and they try to survive with their still suits and in their little tent and their pack and all of this kind of stuff. And then they get to the caves where they meet the Fremen people. And we talked a little bit about this before in the last episode, where they meet Stilgar and Jamis, and Paul has this showdown with Jamis, and he kills him. Which basically gains him like entrance into the Fremen culture. So we talked a little bit about that in the last episode. So listen to that one if you want to hear us talk about that. But yeah, so Paul like spends, what was it, like a year or so with the Fremen people, and
I think it's
the Harkonnens think he's dead. 2 years, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bit of a time jump, but so there's Paul has a child. His named Leto, with Chennai.
So while Paul is with the Fremen, a lot of things are going on. So he has a child, like you said, and then also his mom becomes a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother, and that whole process is very interesting.
Yep.
So there's the liquid that they drink. Do you remember what it was called? It was like
it was the water of something or.
And so, like, Jessica drinks this, and it's actually like this. She's kind of forced into the situation. She doesn't see it coming, and it's the leader, a female leader of the Fremen, tells Jessica to drink this water, and it changes her into a Reverend Mother. And essentially, what I think is happening is that Jessica now has access to all these past lives that different Reverend Mothers lived, and she has access to their knowledge, kind of like we talked about with the collective unconscious with Carl Jung. But what is undisclosed is that she is pregnant at this time with Duke Leto's other child, which is a female, and even though she's in the womb, she is also changed. And then Frank Herbert goes in and describes that. He's like, that little girl comes out and she's saying, I didn't know who I was because there were all these other women basically throughout history and previous generations all speaking to me. And and I kind of had to figure out who I was. And she grows up Fremen. So she's like a warrior 4-year-old crazy girl. And then she also has like the power of like the Reverend Mothers. So she has like psychic abilities, and she does not fit in with the other children because she is other from them, because she's also like a Reverend Mother. And that's kind of where we enter into the final confrontation. Do you want to get into that, Tyler, with Baron Harkonnen and the Emperor? Or are we saving that up for a minute?
No, yeah, we can jump to that. I think the thing was called the Water of Life that you were talking about, where they have to drink that.
Yeah,
Did
you have anything more that you wanted to add on that section of the book?
Yeah, I just liked that description that he gave about like her awakening. It was like she like awoke in the womb almost. It's like she became alive like before she was born. And yeah, I just think it was a really interesting description. I should go back and read it again because I don't remember all the specifics, but I remember it being like a very unique like experience for her. But yeah, I think one thing we can talk about is like Paul's final test to be like a Fremen. He has to ride on the sandworm.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That like completes his like training, or that like completes his process of becoming a true Fremen.
Yeah, it's like his rite
and this
of
was
passage.
Rite of passage, yeah. And this was supposed to also be like the point at which he would take over complete leadership of the Fremen people, and like a lot of the Fremens were expecting him to do that and to eliminate Stilgar and to kind of take over. And I think we talked about it a little bit in the last episode, but like this was an opportunity for Paul to show like how he wanted to be as a leader, and like he wasn't just going to kill people that were valuable to him, just because that's the way that it had always been done. So it's interesting at the beginning whenever he meets the Fremen, like he's very like, okay, I want to learn your customs. We're going to do things how you guys do things and all this kind of stuff. And he goes through all this process, and he lives with them for 2 years or whatever it is. And then whenever he's finally able to like take authority, and then he can now say like, I know how you guys have done things, but now that I'm a leader and you trust me, that we can now change the way that we run like our political system. Like we don't have to like kill off our best leaders to make way for the new ones. Like we can have a leader and use those other leaders to make the whole of the group better in a sense.
Yeah, the survival of the tribe is the most important. So they were definitely more of a community based.
Yep.
Here on planet Earth, we have American society, which is like very individualistic. I want our kids to succeed in sports and all this, and then you look at more Eastern cultures like Japan and China, and there's things like saving face and disgracing your family, and it's more about the survival, like more of a community approach to life, and that's definitely more of the way of the Fremen than it is because it's all about the water. We have to conserve the water, and it's the survival of the tribe, and we're in it together, and we have to recognize. There's a point when it's when the person who trained Paul, and you keep reminding me of his name, and I keep forgetting it.
Gurney Halleck, yeah.
Gurney, thank you. So Gurney is captured. He's like going on a spice run, and he's got soldiers with him, and they get injured when the Fremen attack. And I think it's Stilgar. He's like challenging Gurney, like, don't your people know when like they won't survive, and you have to cut your losses with your injured soldiers. Like, why would we take care of someone we know is going to die? Like, their water could go back to the tribe. And it's such like a foreign concept to us, I think, as Americans, that like sometimes we do have to cut our losses and go from there. And that's just the reality of living on Arrakis is, there is not water and we must survive. Definitely a clash of cultures there. And I do like the sandworm. I forget how exactly that he described it, but basically they're going to be riding sandworms, and they have these kind of like hooks, and they're able to like reposition. And when the hooks are like attached to the sandworms, like they don't want to go back under the sand for some, I think they might be hurt or damaged or something. But yeah, that's how. Yeah. And Paul is even called out when he gets on it. Stilgar says something like, you should have like let the flank take the lead or something because you weren't doing it correct. Yes. And Paul has to summon his inner Bene Gesserit and say, I'm going to not respond to this angrily, and I'm going to say thank you, Stilgar. And then that's before we have the transition of power to right before he takes Stilgar's place as the leader of the Fremen.
Yeah, but that's just like another example of why Stilgar was such a great character. Because like right up until like the very end, and like even Stilgar knew what was supposed to happen. He knew like Paul was supposed to take power and Stilgar was supposed to be killed. But like even up to that point, him knowing that's going to happen, he's still doing his best to like teach Paul everything that he knows and try to make him as best as he could possibly be, knowing what's going to be happening in the future. So yeah, I just love that kind of image where he's like, it's like Dune's also like a coming of age story, and so you get to see Paul go from like the noble kid at 15 to like this mature and confident and like well-rounded leader as he gets older, and a lot of people have like poured into him throughout his life and made him what he is today. And yeah, so I think I love that. I think Stilgar is probably my favorite character. He's awesome. He's epic.
Cool.
But yeah, so he becomes the leader, and there's a scene with Gurney Halleck where Gurney goes in and tries to kill his mother, Jessica, and Paul stops him
because he thinks that she's the betrayer and not Yui. Yes. He thinks that she's the one who betrayed his Duke, and he really valued the Duke as a friend, and the Duke had like pulled him out of like a slave situation or something of incredible hardship and gave him a life and honor, and he was very loyal to the Duke. And then
Yep.
he feels incredibly guilty after Paul like uncontroversially says like, you are wrong, it was Yui all this whole
Yep.
time. And then he's like, oh, you must kill me because I wanted to kill
Yeah.
your mom. And then Paul's like,
Yeah.
why is every good man I have in my life want me to kill him?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good segue. We can just transition into like the very final scenes and the final stages with Paul at the end and the Emperor. And I think we can see it's interesting, like the people who are his allies and his friends, he's very gracious with, and he doesn't want them. He gives them second chances, and he says, "No, I'm not going to kill you. Like, why would I kill you? You're useful to me. You're my ally and my friend, and all these different things." But with his enemies, he is like ruthless. So there's like a stark dichotomy between how he treats treats his friends and he treats his enemies, and they're like completely different. Because towards the end, there's like this final kind of battle scene where the Fremen are using like the cover of this massive sandstorm, and they come in on these like riding worms. Whenever they make this part of the Dune movie, I'm gonna be super stoked to watch that scene because that's gonna be epic. But they go on these sandworms, and they like lay waste to the Harkonnens and the Sardaukar and all this stuff. And Paul gets on.
It's gonna be really cool.
I think he gets on the Emperor's ship. Is this where this all takes down or goes down at the end? I think it's on his ship.
Yeah, I think so. So the Harkonnens had come to the planet kind of like with the idea that they were going to go in and like subjugate the Fremen like really easily, and they were exploring some intelligence that there was like people in like the southern part of Arrakis, and they were exploring that, and so they sent like 5 like convoys full of Sardaukar soldiers, and then they all get killed. We mentioned this earlier in the last podcast by the women and children of the Fremen, but they're being led by, I think it's Aaliyah, the
yes,
Paul's sister, and so
like
she's captured.
4.
Yeah, she's like 4 years old, and she's leading them, and she is captured, and she's brought back to the Emperor and.
Well, no, she says, "I let
Vladimir.
you capture me."
Oh yeah, she says, "I let you capture me." And then the Bene Gesserit mother, who's the Reverend Mother, who was there at the beginning of the book, who tested Paul by holding the ganja bar to his neck and putting his hand in the box. She's there, and she is deathly afraid of this Leah, 4-year-old. She's like, spawn of Satan. Like, you're an abomination. You never should have been born. Yeah, you're an abomination. You should never have been born. Leah doesn't care. She's just like kicking her legs like a little girl, and she doesn't recognize the Emperor or his power. And then they're deep in this conversation, and then that's when Paul launches his attack against the Emperor. And then, like you said, there was like all this fighting going on, and then during the confusion, I think that's when Aaliyah attacks the Baron. She gets close to him and kills him with the ganja bar like poison.
Right in the neck.
Stabs him with the needle, and I just remember the description of him being like suspended like inches above the floor with his like suspenders and kind of like convulsing and dying. I was like, oh, I didn't see, I thought it was going to be Paul that got to him, or like he survived and was in the next book, because he was a good villain. Like, let's be honest. He was like a terrible person.
He was very menacing.
Yeah, he was good. And so at this point, Paul like comes in and seeks audience with the Emperor, who was the Sardaukar was trying to get him to flee, but he didn't. And Paul says, "You've recognized me as the Duke. This is my planet." And like, kind of like you said, Tyler, where he's just kind of like being authoritative, like this is going to be how it is. And he wants to marry one of the Emperor's daughters so that he can become like in line in succession for the emperor's throne. And then that, I think, is when Fade Rotha enters the picture and challenges his cousin. And there's this whole thing where
Oh yeah, the reveal where they're blood related. Yeah.
yeah, they're blood related. So Paul is part Harkonnen, which I didn't understand that part, but it was in there. And so like he is like the blend of everything. Like he's the Bene Gesserit, he's the Paul Maud'Dib from like the Fremen, he's the chosen one, and he's got his magic stuff. And anyway, that's when they are in the one-on-one battle, and Paul chooses the high road, not to know Fade Rotha's conditioning word. And then then the internal monologue where the two are fighting is really good, and they're deciding how they're gonna like take each other out. And Paul ends up winning. He says something that kind of catches Fade Rotha off guard, and just in that second, Paul like takes the victory. Forget exactly how that happens. And then he stands up to the Emperor at the end, and he's like, like, now that you've seen me and you've recognized me as the Duke,
Yep.
I think he claims one of his daughters, and
Yeah.
they're going to be married. But
He claims Princess Arulan, who's been the one writing all the epigraphs, like at the beginning of each of the chapters, she has like a little quote or saying from all of her books and stuff. So like that's the person that he marries.
Mm-hmm. And that's basically where the book concludes. Is Paul has gone from the orphan boy on the planet, barely surviving in his still suit in his still tent with his mother, to being next in line with the Emperor. And then there was also the cool part where he was like, you recognize me at the Duke, but as my position as Paul Maud'Dib of the Fremen, I also sentence you to pay for your crimes. So it was interesting how he kind of combined like his Duke lineage with like his prophecy of being the chosen one from the Fremen, and also like making the Emperor submit to his will and to judgment, basically.
Yep.
All right, Tyler, what did I miss? What do you want to add in there?
I don't know. I think that's pretty much how it ends. I think the Emperor was banking on Fade Rotha winning. That way he wouldn't have to give up control of the planet and all of that stuff. Because if he had been victorious, then there wouldn't be any more Atreides to take, or like, I guess Aaliyah wouldn't be able to take it because she's a girl. I'm not sure how that works, but it seemed like if Fade Rotha would have won, that the planet would have went to him. And I loved the scene because whenever Fade Rotha is killed by Paul, in a last ditch effort, the Emperor asks his what's his name? His name's the Count Fenring. That's what his name is. Yes.
Count Fenring. Yep.
Count Fenring, who was also, I think he was a Mentat. The Emperor basically asks him to go and kill Paul, and the Count Fenring is just like, nah, I think I'm good. I think he basically like sympathizes with Paul's struggle, and he sides with him in the end, essentially. And so the person who the Emperor thought he would have his trust in, the Count, he actually like betrays him, and he sides with Paul.
And then there were those details about Count Fenring, how Paul was like, he can see the future, and it's been, he's been able to see it a little bit more.
Yep.
But like Count Fenring kind of was always there, but he was kind of obscured, and Paul was like, how did he do that? Like, how did he like avoid like being detected by me? And Yeah, that was an interesting. There's lots of depth here. The
Yeah.
plans within plans that
Yeah,
they
we've
talk about.
definitely
There's
missed
lots.
some things. Yeah, there was the
Yeah.
scene earlier whenever he took the water of the life and he went into that coma, and that kind of like fully unlocked his like potential essentially.
Sure.
I think that's when he like kind of ascended to like the full status of
Yeah.
like the prophesied one, because it says something about like it will seem as he is both dead and alive or something, and that's like what a coma is, and that was like part of the prophecy. So like that was like the final like fulfilled prophecy that like the people were able to see and prove that he was the one that had been prophesied. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we probably missed. I will say I did really enjoy all of the epigraphs, like the little things right before all of the chapters. They all had really interesting like quotes in them, or little interesting details about the different characters. And I think it's cool that like we like see this Princess Arulin throughout the whole book, and then at the very end we're like, oh yeah, she marries Paul Atreides, and so that's like the connection. And so she had been like witnessing what had happened on Arrakis throughout the whole time that Paul was there. So and it seems like she's a fairly objective person who's recording all of this stuff, because she really doesn't have any necessarily like love for Paul. It's basically just like a political marriage, and he says that he's gonna like Shania is gonna be like the one that he really loves, but he just has to marry Rulin because of political purposes, so he can have the power that he needs essentially. So
Yep.
yeah, I just loved those little epigraphs and stuff at the very beginning. They always had some interesting tidbits. So yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else? That's pretty much it.
I mean, Dune
I guess
was
final
just a really
thoughts
good,
and
So yeah, Dune. Oh man, it was a mind twisting, like there's just like a different level of like thought that went into it. I feel like it there was just so many different like, again, I just think of the plans within plans, like Frank Herbert's like weaving like it was just so intricate, and there were so many details, and like there's a bigger picture that I definitely feel like I missed reading it. And I even like, I do listen to it, so I went back and I listened to it some more. But even after listening to it several times, like I don't feel like I'm scratching the surface of what is contained in this book, because I feel like there's so much more. I feel like it's building towards something, and I didn't realize it was a series. I thought it was a standalone book, let alone, I think there's 6 in the Dune saga, and it's intergenerational. Like, it's not just about Paul. It goes further and further. So never read the book before. Definitely foundational for science fiction.
And he didn't even finish. He died before he wrote the last novel. So we don't actually even get the conclusion to, like, the planned conclusion that he made, that he had thought of. So
it's just a permanent
that's just
on
too
life.
Bad. His son Brian Herbert has written a bunch of other books as well with another author named Kevin J. Anderson, and they actually did write the conclusion to the Dune saga, but there's like mixed feelings from the Dune fandom, it seems, on whether or not people like those books or not. So I guess it's just personal preference, and it's like,
we live in reality.
How are you supposed to live up? Yeah, how are you supposed to live up to what Frank Herbert created? Like, that's insane. That's like, I mean, Christopher Tolkien like did a good job with all the stuff with his father's works, but like he didn't like write new material. Like, he was basically just releasing stuff that had already been written by his father. So Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty big undertaking to try and like write new material and have it live up
for
to the
sure.
expectation that the original had. So
Yeah, for sure.
I guess props to them for trying to finish the work.
Well,
that his
maybe
father
when we get
started,
there in
but
6 years, Tyler will have an opinion on whether we thought it was good or not.
That's right. But I am looking forward to like reading the other books because yeah, like you said, it is intergenerational. So I think in the next book, Dune Messiah, it does still follow Paul a little bit, but then in the other books we get to follow his other son, Leto Atreides. It's another Leto after the other one had been killed. And I think he's considered the God Emperor. One of the books is called God Emperor of Dune, and I think that's kind of follows his story and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot more side quests and bunny trails and philosophical debates to be had in the Dune saga. So yeah, it'll be cool whenever I get to read those for sure. But yeah, I love Dune, and I would recommend you guys check it out if you haven't, and go see the movie as well. It looks to be really good, and looking forward to that. Yes, that's going to do it for this podcast, and that will conclude our discussion of Dune by Frank Herbert. You can go check out our website, pagesoflight.com. You can check out our blog and other things like that. You can follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Go and subscribe to the YouTube so you can see the video version of this podcast, and you can leave a comment on your thoughts on Dune and what you're hoping for the movie as well. And yeah, you can follow Gabe, neighborhoodnerdservices.com, and check out what he's doing. And yeah, links to all those things will be in the description. Thanks for joining us on our quest to explore the world of Dune, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening. Remember to keep reading and to share the gospel with somebody this week.